Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Testing.
I guess I don't really need to test it.
Testing.
Everyone go around? We're
Testing.
Good? All right, we're good. Hi, everyone. Hi, thank you. An engaged audience member. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I feel so grateful to be sitting here and getting to talk about the future in person. We know there's infinite interesting conversations you could be joining right now, everything from neurotech to the importance of eating insects. So we are happy that you've chosen us. We're about to have a really fun conversation on dating and romance. So something I'm very interested in personally and selfishly, but I imagine that extends much beyond me because all of you showed up. Who am I? I am Cecelia Girr. I am the Director of Cultural Strategy for an entity called Backslash, which is the Cultural Intelligence Unit for TBWA worldwide. And I imagine you had no idea who I was, but I assume that since you're here, you do know what this talk is about. And this is Optimized Romance. Is tech killing the mood? And we are here to talk about how an obsession with optimizing romance is pushing tech further into the most personal process we have, finding and falling in love. All right, so of course there's so many different ways that tech is redefining our romantic relations, from matchmaking to sex tech to robo-companions. We could write a whole book on it, but since we've got less than an hour, we are going to focus on the biggest and clearest territory of our romantic lives that tech has pushed into, dating and matchmaking. And here to talk with me, I have 3 brilliant panelists, each who bring a different perspective or angle into the discussion. So first we have Babita Spinelli. She is an award-winning, internationally recognized psychotherapist, executive coach, mental coach, relationship expert who focuses on helping people optimize their relationships and thrive in their lives. She's been featured in media outlets such as Forbes, Bloomberg, ABC, NBC, CNN, Men's Health, Business Insider, you name it. She's been featured, but we're really grateful that she is here and adding us to that list. We have Rashied Amini, who Dr. Rashied Amini is the founder of Nanaya, the first app to algorithmically predict your love life based on social dynamics modeling and economic forecasting. And how does he have the know-how to do that? Well, he's also a mission formulation systems engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. And since 2008, he's led the design of numerous space mission concepts, created a framework for the design of autonomous systems, created NASA's response to Hurricane Harvey and other natural disasters, costed the building of future Moon and Mars bases, forecasted NASA's demand for plutonium, and so on, so you can trust he's not one to mess up an algorithm. And then we have Kim Kaplan, CEO and founder of Snack, which is a video-driven dating app where TikTok meets dating for Gen Z, so fun. Kim has spent over a decade in the dating space, app side, launching her career as one of the first and earliest employees at the dating app Plenty of Fish, leading to product marketing revenue and initiatives. And in her role as an instrumental part of the executive team, she culminated in the successful acquisition by Match Group in 2015. And following that, she shifted into investing and advising startups before jumping back in on the scene with Snack. So we have a dating app historian over here. All right, so hello everyone. Now that we've introduced all of these wonderful people, let's jump in. So chances are, if you've dated in the last 10 years, you know that tech is really reshaping our romantic relations. In fact, 40% of Americans are using online dating. That's 1 in 4 people. Found that on eHarmony. I want to dig in first with you, Babita. As a psychotherapist and a relationship coach and an overall professional, on the front lines of dating and relationships, how is technology really reshaping, our romantic pursuits right now? Give us the bird's eye view.
All right, great question. It is really multifaceted. On the one hand, technology has been an amazing space for people to really connect with other people all over the world. And especially for individuals, let's say, who have been in either rural places where they couldn't meet anyone, or maybe they're an introvert and had some anxiety about dipping their toe into the dating pool, or a single parent or someone who's gone through a divorce. For them, technology has been such a gift in being able to go onto platforms and really meet people and connect with people. So that is super positive. Now I'm going to go into what I call the stuff that's a little challenging that's been coming up for individuals. Part of it is there's so many choices, as probably everybody here knows, around when you go onto a dating app. And what happens is psychologically, when we have a lot of choices, I call the paradox of choice, people feel overwhelmed. When you're overwhelmed, you start to feel anxious. When you start to feel anxious, you start to have a difficult time feeling like you can meet expectations. And so there's this circle that's happening where there may be sort of an increase in a bit of anxiety in that space around dating. The other part of it is this. For individuals that are kind of leaning into this space, what they're finding is it's impacting maybe their body image, how they feel about themselves, sometimes their self-worth or their self-esteem. And there's also a bit of an addictive quality. So individuals have been experiencing like not being able to let go of the device, and they're always looking and searching. And so that's leading to a bit of dating burnout. So we've got a lot of positive things, but in the mental health space, this is what is coming up as well.
As a person who has gone through that firsthand, I can say burnout is a really great term for it. Kim, I want to turn to you. Will you give us from the app perspective?
Well, I think when you're really talking about burnout, a lot shifted when you had swiping apps be introduced into the market. And I remember when I first heard about Tinder, and I don't know how everyone here feels, it wasn't just about a dating app anymore. It was your friends were showing you their phones to say, hey, look what you can do now. You can just swipe back and forth. And that was just a UX pattern that didn't exist really previously. And it's so ingrained in our phones now, we don't realize that Tinder really was the first app to come up with that. And what it's done is, going back to what Babita was saying, is it's given you that paradox of choice. You can move through these apps so quickly now and move through people so quickly that you're making decisions on someone in seconds versus actually taking in who they are and understanding what it is that they're looking for.
I think that's a really great point, and to both of your points, it's been wonderful, but it's also been sort of terrible and not necessarily healthy for us. I forget, I was telling one of you on a call the other day, but there was an article in the Japan Times that came out about approximately 800 firms in Japan have signed up for an AI-powered dating app, I think it was you, Rashied, to help employees find love at work and become more productive as a result. And the app helps out during initial text chats, suggesting when someone should ask for a date, and give you questions to ask to move a conversation along. So it makes me think the landscape has become so stressful and so difficult that now we even have employee benefits to help us cope with the stress of it. And which brings me to you, Rashied. You created Nanaya, and with that you're starting to really hack away at the stress with some algorithmic answers. So will you tell us about what Nanaya is and why you decided to create it during the pandemic?
Of course. So it's been a very long story from years ago. It was about 2014. I was in a relationship for 2 years. I was madly, deeply in love. We were together originally in LA, but then I moved to St. Louis, and I was working for JPL remotely, doing my PhD. And after 2 years, she said to me, I don't know if I'm really feeling it. I want to do a cost-benefit analysis of our relationship. And I just said, that's silly. We've been together 2 years. Either you know it or you don't. But she was clearly having these issues. She didn't know what she wanted. And that just made me really sad. And I thought to myself, well, I could build it. So around that time, I was working on a couple different things. I had been actually costing the building of Moon and Mars bases. So if you imagine, you're sending a lot of different rockets, and You may be doing different things on the moon and Mars. There's a lot of different ways of doing it, but there's really going to be a certain cost associated with any of these given architectures, is what we call them. Also, I was working on a proposal anyway for, let's say the killer asteroid's coming to hit Earth. There might be many different ways of deflecting that asteroid based on the knowledge you have in advance, the ways you architect that mission, like how many nukes do you want to put on it, how big are they, when do you detonate them, things like that. And there's going to be one way that is probably going to give you the optimal way of doing it, and if you care about humanity, you want to find that one way. Unfortunately, we didn't win it. So given those, I came up with the algorithm one weekend in Excel, and I showed it to her, thousands of lines, multiple tabs, and said, isn't this absurd? And we broke up. But even though I thought this was silly, it's not the way I thought about romance. It ended up kind of working. And so the next step was putting up ads on Craigslist to meet people. So it was as volunteers. We've been in cafes, and I interviewed about like 20 to 30 different people to see, is my algorithm able to predict what they think was their best outcome for a current or past relationship. And instead of machine learning, it was kind of human learning to set these free parameters. It got to the point where, hey, I'm able to go back and predict the optimal outcomes. Great. I guess I could just make this into an app. The time I was doing my PhD, still working remotely, then I was building an app. So me and another college friend, we built it up till today. It's been self-funded. It's just me and him working it, and we have essentially no marketing, but I love speaking. We have like 4,000 new users going in, and you guys can try it out. And we're able to predict people's love lives.
I feel like you could do a whole panel drawing the scientific similarities between asteroids and relationships. Yeah, I think that's great. And culturally, we're really starting to see this growing desire and fascination around data and DNA and deep science being able to give us the answers, and in many forms, really isolate the one in ways that we haven't seen before. And there's really great examples of this. I like to point to Netflix's The One. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but they explore a future where DNA matchmaking makes it possible for everyone to find their soulmate. Don't know if that's actually possible, but we're going to go with it. You also have strategic dating. I love this example, where heterosexual women are sharing dating strategies online on a subreddit called Female Dating Strategy, and it's garnered over 20,000 subscribers since its inception in 2019. And essentially, they're hoping to, optimize their path towards finding a perfect partner. And then while we have TV series, dreaming up new ways of finding the one, and women trading dating strategies and insight and intel online, we also have researchers in Europe who are working to, use AI to generate portraits of your dream partner just by looking at brain scans. So all of this is really crazy to think about, and this is where the future is heading. And it makes me think romance was once about mystery and excitement and this sort of inexplicable magic, but increasingly we're seeing it start to be defined by data and DNA and all of these things in science. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out in the future. But that sort of leads me to these culturally held but not technologically defined notions like the one and destiny and soulmates and romantic chemistry. I want to talk about how they're evolving as well. So Babita, psychologically, why do you think that we're so fixated on this idea of the one, and are we becoming more disillusioned with it in this paradox of choice situation that we're going through, or hungrier for it?
Great question.
Big question.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big one. There's a lot here, but I'll try and capture it succinctly. First, the first part. There is still a desire, the core human need to find the one. It is part of what I call our emotional system, that nester in all of us that wants to feel deeply understood, wants to feel like there is that person in our life that has our back, that is going to be our companion, that is going to know our truth, and that they will be with us till the end of time. And that is a very core human need. And it still exists. And then we have another side to what is evolving as well. So the ideas or the notions of, like, historically, of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Romeo and Juliet, although that exists in our internalized beliefs, we're also recognizing modern love, which is there can be more than one of the one. That this is a space that's opening up to see that there's so many individuals out in the world. And that perhaps if we've had a relationship that hasn't worked out, that we don't have to be despondent, we can actually be hopeful. That is the hungrier part of what is evolving, that the desire and the continuous elevation of being able to meet more people and feeling like those experiences are out there. Then we have the disillusioned side, and as a psychotherapist, I'm always giving it that objective view that there are many sides to things and not judging them. The disillusioned part of it is when we think about what's going on. I think about, if anyone's been to like Yo Sushi, the conveyor belt sushi, versus omakase, where you're like enjoying the dining experience. I think people are feeling a bit disillusioned because they feel like they're just trying to grab on to dating and relationships, but like kind of missing it, or it not quite working out and not feeling satiated. Or they find someone, but then people aren't really in the work. They're not allowing for the messy, they're not doing the deep dive. They're ready to give up on it because someone else is on the conveyor belt. They don't need to stay in that meal. And so that's the disillusion part, which is why we see infidelity is up, why divorce is up, etc. So we have two spaces around hunger and disillusionment.
I think that's a really important point, and it makes sense. So since we're not going to travel back in time and really erase tech and apps from our lives, we need to be thinking about solutions. And I know DNA matchmaking is still light years away. I don't know, you tell me, and potentially not possible at all. But we've got algorithms. Rashied, you've built Nanaya to be the love prediction algorithm, but you and I have talked about this. There's a lot that algorithms can't do. Can you break down what it would take for an algorithm to actually be able to identify the one, and why it's so damn difficult to predict if a relationship will work out?
So at a very high level, one of the things you have to think about is sort of the context of dating, where you are not two people in the universe alone, which we'll get to. You are live in the world, going to work, meeting people every day. And so like how you date in one city may be different from a different city, and your outcomes are going to be very different. And for an algorithm to be able to encompass all of that variability and dynamicism is actually essentially impossible, and it goes to the mathematics of it. So you can think of a scenario where it is the simplest thing you can imagine. Like in physics, we come up with this idea of like a spherical cow, this particle that is like perfect. And so in our perfect system, you can imagine two people in the universe, Romeo and Juliet. And you can think of an equation to ascribe how Romeo feels about Juliet. It's a function of how he feels about her in the future. It's how he feels about her now and how he feels about himself. In the same way, Juliet and how she feels about Romeo in the future is a similar function. And this is what we'd call a two-dimensional nonlinear dynamic system. And so with a few parameters, you can actually predict almost perfectly what's going to happen in their future, so long as you know their personalities. But as you know, when you wake up in the morning, you think about your day and you think just about yourself, and you look in the mirror, you conceive of like, oh, this is how I look like. You think about what you have to do, and that affects your mood. And so just how you even feel about yourself encompasses many dimensions of like personality and self-interaction. And then you get into the curse of mathematics. Two-dimensional nonlinear systems may be perfectly predictable, but as soon as you get to 3 dimensions, it's actually impossible. And that's actually what's the whole point of chaos theory, is that you can't really predict anything greater than 3-dimensional systems. And then, human personalities can be many dimensions. There's a lot of subjectivity associated with how you, perceive of any of, human behavior. Now, think about something that is much more physical, the weather. We know about things like temperature, pressure, humidity, how much water might come up from the oceans that affects weather. And still the best we can do is predicting maybe 7 to 10 day forecasts. But past that, good luck. And so for an algorithm to really be able to say, oh, we can really say we know what's best for you and we know exactly what's going to happen, mathematically it's just not really possible. But there are some lessons, some patterns that we can learn, and there are some things that algorithms can do and apps can do to help at least inform self-knowledge and give some indications of what relationship patterns may emerge.
Yeah, and it's more of a sort of a question of, is that what really people want it to do?
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, even if the algorithm tells you, maybe this is the one, at the end of the day, it's up to the individual to choose. And I can be sort of like matched with like the perfect home or perfect car, but on any given day, maybe that's not what I want. And when you go to these sorts of dating apps, we often carry multiple intents. And so how does an app even parse what your intention is? So there's issues in what we consider to be measurement of intention. And that's more on the the human side and how the human interacts with the algorithm.
Very interesting. And Kim, I want to turn to you here. Are these ideas, going back to what we were talking with Babita, of destiny and soulmates and the one, are they still valid from the app perspective and from your experience?
I think a lot of what you're hearing here is that there isn't just one for everybody, that there could be multiple people that could be your person. When I was working at Plenty of Fish, when you signed up for the app and you filled out your personality test, we could show you the 10 people that you'd be happy with. The problem is, there was 2 kind of caveats to it. One, when you first signed up, and now AI is probably solved for this, we couldn't tell you who you'd be attracted to. The second one is we couldn't tell you if you were in the right moment in time to meet that person. So if you think about when you sign up for an app, oftentimes you're just looking around, you just want to see what's happening. Maybe you just got out of a relationship. You're at a very different moment in time in your life than somebody else who might be signing up being like, I just want to get married. I just want that relationship. And we don't know when you join an app where you are in that spectrum of time and if it is the right moment. And that's where the hardest predictions come from. And I think it very much goes back to what your point was, Rashied.
Yeah, and I think you were also pointing out something interesting to me the other day about there being sort of a generational difference in the way that we view the one. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, if you think about even how these algorithms have existed in the past, they've been trained off of traditional relationships. And as you're seeing new generations come up, the idea of monogamy and the idea of relationships is evolving. And so these algorithms haven't been adapted to take that into consideration. And I think that's something that people need to be aware of, that they're going into these kind of heterosexual normative relationships that these algorithms are predicting for them. And that doesn't reflect where we are today in our society.
Yeah, I mean, I think, with what the 3 of you are saying, you're sort of getting at this idea that as we've optimized the romantic process to find the one or our soulmate or whatever you want to call it and make that faster and easier and more hopeful, what we've actually done is myth bust the idea that it actually exists at all. And we've come to this collective realization through data and through science and through actual case studies, which in turn is, really forcing us to shift our thinking on relationships as a whole. So if there's more than one, why are we still viewing it that way? Why is this still a construct that we're building systems around? And it really brings up the point that we need to build a new definition here and evolve our singular definition of it. So I want to switch gears a bit here to something a little bit fun and venture into the zeitgeist with 2 recent, now infamous cultural figures, if you will, in the world of dating apps. The Tinder swindler and West Elm Caleb. Has everyone heard of both? Yeah? Okay. Is there anyone that doesn't know West Elm Caleb? Okay, great. I will give you a background. West Elm Caleb was a situation a few months back where this legion of women discovered via social media that they had all been loved and left by the same man, who came to be known as West Elm Caleb. He was a 25-year-old New York-based furniture designer for West Elm. And they basically put together the pieces and realized this guy had similar patterns of wooing them, sent them all the same Spotify playlist, same pickup lines, you name it, which created this total pitchfork moment on TikTok where they went after him and shared their stories and outed him so much so that he had to scrub himself from the internet. So that was one situation. Has everyone heard of the Tinder swindler or watched it on Netflix? Okay, great. So why am I bringing these up is the fact that they're both illustrative of how dating culture right now is pretty terrible for women. Being ghosted or being treated poorly are just par for the course, and both of these sort of John Tucker must die moments have now spawned a million think pieces related to the conversation on why we need to do better in this area. Babita, I know the situations vary and they're not the same, so I'm not going to equate them, but in essence, both of these were big cultural manhunts for men who wronged women on dating platforms. I want to ask you, how are these sort of viral conversations illustrative of our collective romantic psyche right now?
To answer that question, I want to make a distinction between the difference between Tinder swindler and West Elm Caleb, because it's really
Thank you.
significant. So Tinder swindler, right, is a guy who literally preyed on women's vulnerability who were looking for love on this platform and defrauded them. It was a huge fraud for like millions of dollars, right? There was like literally an FBI chase for this guy. Really awful, really what I'd call big T trauma experience. And these women really wanted to share and express about this trauma to help other women realize that this exists. West Elm Caleb, this is a guy, he's working at West Elm, and right, he's writing these messages, he's sending the same playlist to these women, he's sort of love bombing, we all kind of know that word from that narcissism, and he is sort of messaging them, reining them in, but then ghosts them, right? West Elm Caleb, little T trauma. Could he have gently said, hey, you're not for me? Could he have maybe used a more unique approach to each of these women? Yes, little T trauma, right? Still not great behavior. We're not condoning it at all. The common theme, though, is that people are getting frustrated, right? They're on these apps and they're really looking for that right person, so to speak, and then dealing with what I would call these experiences of really egregious, unhealthy behavior. Now, these behaviors have happened before, way before technology had this expansive platform where everybody in the world knows what's going on. I mean, West Elm Caleb is like off the radar. He can't even be on social media anymore, right, because of this. But they used to happen. For example, if you think about ghosting, all right, I'm going to sort of date myself in terms of many, many years ago when I went to NYU. I remember I like dated this guy and suddenly he never called me back. And then I like see him in the cafe in New York and I'm like, wait a second, he didn't call me back and he's out there on this date. I mean, ghosting has always happened, right? However, what's going on now is people have the opportunity to put it out on the platform and it becomes public knowledge. And so from my lens, what's happening collectively goes back to feeling disillusioned. There's frustration and anger about what's taking place, but now there's a vehicle to put it out there into the world. And so collectively, people can do that now. So it becomes a little scary.
Amen. You said it, sister. All right, so obviously, tech could be doing better by us, and the good news is that we're starting to see platforms starting to rewrite their wrongs. Right now we're seeing big online first dating platforms pivot to offline meetups like Bumble we've talked about. Bumble is one of the major players leading the movement towards the new hybrid online-offline model. We also have Tinder, who's newly introduced a way for members to go on virtual blind dates, really making online dating less superficial and mimicking more authentic real-life scenarios in the app. And then coming off the back of the West Elm's Caleb story, Kim, Snack app came out with a new feature called Ghost. I want you to talk to us about Ghost and why it was so important to develop.
I mean, it really was under the perfect storm in us launching this just around when West Elm Caleb was happening. But we came up with this idea months ago. And I think what's happened with online dating and people going on so many more dates now, ghosting is just becoming prolific. And it's something that, while it has happened in the past, it's exponentially getting worse because it's become acceptable. And what we wanted to do is, in some ways, try to right that. So the way it works is, if you get reported for ghosting, we actually, multiple times, we would actually drop you down in the algorithm so you don't get shown up as frequently. And what we're trying to do is more dissuade bad behavior. If you know that you're not going to show up as much, then hopefully you do the right thing and not necessarily ghost the people that you're seeing on the platform, because then you're not going to have success on the platform itself. So I think, it's one of many ways that I think apps can and technology can improve to change behavior, but it needs to be less acceptable in society that this is the way it happens. And there's different levels of ghosting. Like, there's the ghosting for someone you happen to match with and you never responded to, and then there's the ghosting of where you actually went on dates and you never spoke to them again. So I think you have to be okay with having that range of ghosting, but it is a change in behavior that we need to stop openly doing it and being more respectful of the people that we are dating.
So coming up with that mechanism had nothing to do with West Elm Caleb. It was
Not at all. We actually launched it about a month before West Elm Caleb, but it happened to just be that perfect storm of, the press was obviously obsessed with what he had done, and we were able to say, hey, if that had happened on Snack, he wouldn't have shown up in the algorithm. He wouldn't have been able to impact as many women, because they would have come on and reported him for ghosting, and our algorithm would have kind of ditched him down, and he wouldn't be kind of shown up to that many people. So I wish that that was available to those women.
Have you seen people using it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, just making sure. I think this is really indicative of, where things are going. And until now, this sort of process of optimizing our romantic lives through technology has been largely without thoughts on the user in the experience in the app and ethical standards for protecting that user. So I think the big thing to highlight here is that there's no problems that are happening on dating apps that aren't happening in real world, from ghosting to harassment. It's just really a conduit for it, and there will always be good and bad human behavior, as you're saying, shaping the tech platforms and the environment, but the role of technology will be to bring in that ethical standard and really use their technology as a way to mitigate the pitfalls of dating in real life, which could be a real positive. So, Rashied, I want to talk to you about this. Can we talk about the overall change that needs to happen from the platform and algorithm perspective? What could technology be doing better?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to, first off, the perspective of the user, I think it's important to appreciate that what the app is trying to do is ultimately to make revenue for the company. And the way you do that, in one way, is to make sure that users got their dopamine fix just right enough to keep them on the app. And so that's not an issue in and of itself, but there can be things done to make users more aware of what's going on, because it's sort of a game. And if you know that there's this game being played, you can be more aware of it, self-conscious of it, and understand that it's going to maybe affect you less. So one of those things, for instance, I would say is delinearizing the user experience. We have things like Tinder, I think that's, and Bumble, maybe the easiest to pick on, where you're swiping left and right, and at some point these aren't humans anymore. These are just faces on a screen. And just beforehand, we were talking about this GIF from about 10 years ago of this steak being rotated by a motor, swiping right on every profile. And it's kind of cynical, right? We're all humans. We all have sort of these feelings, and use of online dating is a positive indicator for depression and anxiety. So having a flow that is not can help to personalize individuals, maybe through use of video, is going to help improve you understanding this is a person that I may be ghosting. Feature that Kim had mentioned for reducing the value of using a ghost to de-weight people in an algorithm is very valuable as well. And then another aspect of it is we have very opaque algorithms where that I think Babita was mentioning earlier. If you had liked that, you're going to like this. And so if we're trying to learn of what people liked in the past or what relationships have been in the past to predict what you'll like in the future, that isn't always how things work best. And so having a little bit more interaction between the user and the algorithm is going to allow users to understand, okay, there is this game being played, and maybe I do have a little bit levers that I can pull to make the experience more tailored to ultimately my needs. And then the last part of that is making sure that, you may be on an app swiping with different intentions. And so being able to make an algorithm aware of that, oh, I'm here for hooking up, and when I'm hooking up, maybe my filters are set this wide, but if I want something serious, they're set in this different way. And that's a feature that is really yet to come out that I think is going to help the experience be improved for users on both sides.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And Kim, I want to turn it over to you because you have a really interesting case study with Snack of what technology could be doing better to make it more fun for us in terms of dating.
Yeah, so Snack is a TikTok-based dating app, essentially. It's if TikTok and Tinder had a baby. And what the idea was really born from the notion of when I was doing some research into how Gen Z is dating. They all say they use Tinder because they have to. There's no really better option. But as soon as they match on Tinder, they're moving over to Instagram. And the reason they're doing that is so that they can kind of covertly flirt with one another. And they're changing their stories and they're changing their habits and they're kind of showing themselves off in a different way as soon as they have that new match that they've moved over to Instagram. I think we were talking about, there's even some examples of people that have created close friend groups and they put all their new matches in that close friend group on Instagram so that they're the only ones that are seeing these new stories, which people shouldn't need to use two apps to date. It should be fun, it should be easy, it should be a great experience, and unfortunately it's just gone so far down this way of being so easy to create an account, you don't know whether or not someone's on there for an ego boost, just to be a looky-loo to see what's going on, versus actually having that intent to date. And so you have this broad spectrum of people on all these dating apps now. And hopefully with Snack, our goal is that by creating a video, there is that extra barrier that forces all those looky-loos out, and you get to showcase yourself in a more fun and kind of playful way like you would on TikTok. And as a consumer, it's also way more exciting on the other side that you get to see tone of voice, you get to see how someone moves, how they interact, and there's something very special about that and unique versus your static profiles that exist today where you upload your 5 images and you write your paragraph about yourself. Like, dating apps and profiles have not changed in 15 years, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be more like social media is, where it is way more engaging and fun, and you get that kind of real life perspective as to who somebody is.
I love that persona of the looky-loo. I hope you use that in Dex.
I say it too often.
I think it's great, and all of you are bringing up the point of, is tech killing the mood or helping us find the ones we love? I think the answer to all of your points, it lies a little bit in both. And looking forward, we'll see technology like Snack, like Nanaya, start to play a critical role in figuring out what should be online versus offline and bringing in those ethical standards and bringing in features that promote better behaviors throughout. So before we run out of time, I want to get into the fun part here, some predictions for optimized romance of the future and what will it look like, and better yet, what should it look like? Babita, I want to go to you first. Tell us about your predictions for optimized romance of the future.
Well, I think this is also just based on being on top of reading what's evolving in this space, where there's going to be more dating apps, more opportunity for virtual experiences, right, with AI, et cetera. There may even be virtual dating, et cetera. From my lens, what's really important is for the creators of these platforms to really look at how do we still bring in human connection in these spaces, and developing some component of that. How do we also look at the mental health aspect of it? Can we bring in individuals to really take a look at what's going on in terms of behaviors? How do we have more safe spaces on these platforms where people do feel safe, maybe less anxious about it, and really looking at that more carefully? I also feel that this is a co-created space. So there's these vehicles that are out there for people to connect and meet people from all over the world and find the one if that's what they're looking for. But it is also the responsibility of individuals to really also look at what they're bringing to the table when they join. So do they know what they want? Have they looked at their own unhealthy relationship patterns? Are they bringing what they need and want onto the app, and taking a pause and doing it mindfully? Or are they not, and are they blaming the app for some of the choices that they're actually making or repeating? So I think that that's really important to look at and see it as partnering in technology between individuals and the users, as well as the platform, and bringing it all together in a really beautiful, meaningful way.
I think that's great, putting the onus on both the platform and the person. It's a really big point. And I want to bring this over to Kim. Will you tell us about your predictions for the future?
Sure. One, I think from a safety perspective, everyone is aware that there are safety issues on dating apps. And I think there's a really big opportunity for some of the bigger players in the market, like Google and Apple, to really come out and take a stand and help dating apps out and help the industry out in general. They have so much more information about everybody than what each individual app does, that I just think there's a really great opportunity for them to support the industry. And then my big prediction that I actually think is the way that the industry is going to go is I really see this blurring of online and offline. I think that you'll walk into a room like today and you'll be able to see people's dating profiles around them. You'll be able to see what they like, who they are, if they're single, if they aren't single. I think same way that you'd be able to see someone's LinkedIn profile. And I think that once technology gets there and that we have wearables and we have the ability to kind of project these mechanisms onto water molecules in the air, that's ultimately what makes it interesting. Think about walking into a bar and you can just automatically go, okay, that person. And you don't have to sit at your computer screen anymore. And it gives you that opportunity to go up and talk to them because they are opting for you to see that. They're opting for you to know that they are single. And so they're putting themselves out there without actually having to put themselves out there. And it's just kind of that passive way of dating and blurring those online and offline worlds.
I think we've talked about comparing it to, has anyone played Sims? Maybe, yeah. You know the little cubes over their head or the jewels over their head? We envision it like that, where you sort of tap the jewel and all of their information comes out, and you know if they're single.
Or you wink at them in real life and it actually sends them a wink.
Yes. That's going to be what happens.
Absolutely.
Rashied, what would we need to make that happen?
Well, I think that it's a pretty big ask, and I think technologically we're quite a ways there. All of our information is pretty much accessible to all these different companies, and all that needs to happen is all the companies need to talk together, have a shared data format, and all of a sudden a dating app will know everything that Google, Facebook, and Apple knows from you. Are you okay with that? And I think that's really the big thing where, as far as what Naya has worked on, we can come up collectively with these algorithms. They can do an incredible job of predicting who is really good for one another, whether it's for hooking up or a long-term relationship. But ultimately, that's kind of in the hands of the individual to choose, is this something we want? And then collectively, is this something we want as a society? I mean, maybe we can just go to a bar and instead of, winking and hoping that the app sends the wink, just go up and say, hey, how's it going?
Novel.
And something else you were telling me about, which really stuck with me, is the fact that algorithms really aren't that smart. And it would be nice if on the customer end, if you could actually interact with that algorithm and give it more feedback as to what it is giving to you.
Yeah, and that's the sort of feature where on Google, you might be curious about, oh gosh, am I pregnant? And then all of a sudden you search it, and then you start getting all these ads for diapers and strollers, and you're like, oh gosh, this is not what I wanted at all. I wish I could tell Google, and you can now, say, well, actually, I'm not really going to have a baby. In the same way, you might be swiping on a person, and all of a sudden, your dating app is funneling you into a set of preferences that you actually don't really have, but that one person was really cool and unique, and something stood out about them, I don't know, they had a ferret, I don't know. And you just were curious about that. So if apps can start exposing some of the levers of the matchmaking algorithm, and I don't mean just the filtering, but really, hey, the algorithm now thinks that you're into this sort of a person, maybe you can have an opportunity to change, well, no, I'm really not, at least not for this intention, not for that intention, and you can specify more how the algorithm works for you rather than it just being a medium and it shoves what it thinks you want.
And that exists on other apps, just not really in the dating app world.
Exactly.
Yeah, Kim, do you Do you have any opinions on why it doesn't exist yet?
I mean, I think it's a great opportunity for, especially if you've gone into real life and met somebody, if you're able to come back into the app and say, that date wasn't good because of X, Y, Z, then you could ultimately help train the algorithm. But we just, for whatever reason, don't have that today.
Well, I think that's a really great note to end on. There's a ton of opportunity here and lots to look forward to and lots to look out for, but we'll continue to see what happens. And thank you guys for joining. This is Optimized Romance. If anyone has any questions for our panelists and experts, feel free to take the mic. A long line. All right. First up.
All right. Hi, my name is Rohit. I'm with TBWA, Media Arts Lab, so I think there's some people here. But as someone that's been out of the, I guess, retired from dating, like in the 2000s, this is just very illuminating. But do you think that, while the platforms are really established ways to begin dating and make new connections, have platforms actually done enough work to help people end relationships and because that's how we end up with ghosting or the really toxic doxing? I'm still kind of defending, West End Kill, because that was a bit extreme, but like all this toxic behavior comes because we've given people a toolbox without actually showing them how to put those tools away and how to stop. So do you think they've done enough, or can they do more?
Who wants to take this?
I mean, I'll take it and turn it over, but I absolutely agree that the apps can do more. Definitely. I think there's a lot of toxic behaviors that are coming up. I think people are getting really concerned about it. And maybe there are some ways of putting in either some more internal controls. I think, Kim, you were talking about, right, the ghosting and the tool around that. Perhaps more of an opportunity for there to be more of a dialogue or conversation about it so that there's feedback going back to the creators and individuals that are responsible to put these tools together and be able to say, okay, here's what we need to do. I think what would be great is, for example, as you're describing, like, is there a channel to bring that feedback in that doesn't get lost in space somewhere, and then to take that data and be able to figure out what we can do so that we can track this toxic behavior and sort of try and diminish it collectively.
Rashied, over to you.
I mean, if you think of a broader version of a dating app that includes like more comprehensive features, like as a dating coach and a matchmaking tool, you'll have some sense of like what the personalities are and what you can think of traditionally of like, oh gosh, I want to break up with her or him. And you go to your friends and you tell them a story and they might give you some advice. Well, if the app really knows more about the two people and you have like some trained like psychologists on your team, you can offer like prompts on like how to possibly do that in like painless ways and ways that you can also grow as a person and learn from what you had gone through.
And do you think that will happen more in the future where we have this integration of coaches who are helping the relationship more than just at the touch point in the beginning?
I think it's going to be a bit of a leg up to do that in a way that doesn't expose you to a lot of liability, but I think it's something that is possible though.
I think that's a really interesting question. All right, next up.
People often talk about ghosting as a negative cultural phenomenon. It's seen as very rude and not good dating behavior. Sometimes when you politely reject someone, they can respond in very angry ways, and ghosting sometimes is a safety measure. How does the reporting feature on your app account for that? Because I could imagine, a woman ghosting maybe 7 or 10 men who seem unsafe and them all reporting her because they were kind of unsafe and are a little vindictive. So how does your app account for that?
So we also provide the mechanism where you can unmatch. So if you are reported for ghosting, we'll actually let you know, hey, somebody reported you for it, and then you can respond back as to why. So we do give you that opportunity. But also, if you aren't feeling safe with someone, you can unmatch. And we do allow that opportunity for you to then say, I'm unmatching with this person, and you can leave them up, like, we try to ask you, like, hey, leave a polite message as to why you're unmatching with them, but we're not going to force anyone to do that.
Thank you. Next up.
Hi there, my name's Barry. Thank you for the great panel. I was raised by a single mom, watched her date a lot of types of guys, and became a dating coach ultimately because of that, trying to empower women to date men, not boys. And what I'm curious about is to speak to each of your positions, how do we better align the interests of the business that needs to be profitable with also incentivizing behavior change within people? I'm looking at Web3 as an opportunity to use transparency, to know what the dating history is of different people. But how do we create almost a gamified environment where you can give the person what they want, find a mate, give them what they need, change their dating behavior? Because as I always say, the platforms just amplify the results you're getting. It's not going to change them. How do we align the interests of the business to be profitable, the consumer to find someone, and what they really need, which is that behavior change quite often?
Kim, I'm looking at you.
I will tell you, dating is extremely profitable. It's an extremely profitable business. You can look at, there's tons of public dating companies out there, and you can look at their financials. I think it comes down to rethinking what some of those models are. And when I use the ghosting examples, because when I thought about ghosting as being such a negative experience for people, what can we do to try to solve for that? What can we do to try to make it better? And to me, it's more about just changing the initial behavior of it versus making it like, how do you just be open and honest with somebody? How do you have those better conversations? And I even go back to the idea that we were just talking about around how are we not, like, at this point, we don't have dating apps that are taking in feedback from the dates you've been on and trying to improve the algorithms as a result of that. And I think that would be a really powerful tool to be able to do exactly what you're talking about, is creating a better experience for me as a dater, for the people that I'm dating, the people that I've connected with on the app, and really ultimately optimize the algorithm. And it's just not there yet.
I'd like to add something. I love what you just said, Kim. Great question. I think it's having the right people at the table too. The individuals that can actually say, hey, this is what is going on psychologically. This is how we might need to change behavior. A behaviorist, right, at the table to be able to provide that feedback. Maybe more education. Maybe on the apps we actually have a dating coach, a psychotherapist, sort of saying, hey, you're about to begin on this journey. Here are some great ways to start. And to be able to share that, and so that individuals feel that comfort level, and then they're like, all right, I'm ready to go. So maybe taking what they might learn in the therapeutic space or the relationship coaching space, but put it more on the platform as well.
Yeah, just sorry, go ahead, Rashied.
Yeah, I just had a brief response to that. I mean, you mentioned Web 3.0, but I mean, this is where you have to detach the medium from what's underlying it in the back end. And so the algorithm is independent of whether or not it's just a swiping feature or a way of interacting in some virtual space. I mean, there is some influence in like how you interact with profiles in a linear way versus maybe a more parallel way. But ultimately, it's that curating algorithm, which is like making all that extract some sort of signal from that noise. That's more independent, though, I would say.
Right. So just two quick thoughts after that. Thank you for those answers, by the way. I sat down with someone from, I think it was Match, about 10 years ago, and they admitted, they said, yeah, we talked to people from the casino industry about random incentivization, to keep people playing. So to me, that's not alignment of interests, right? It's, I want you to keep coming back. It's like I say to clients, I want to be obsolete. I want you to not need me. That's sort of the main point. And I had one other thing, but I forgot, so I'll talk to you after.
So I will say on the opposite side, if you, as a dating app, create connections and you help people meet their person, they become your biggest ambassadors. So you want those positive relationships. And I can't speak for Match and I can't speak for some of the other dating apps, but at the core of a lot of dating apps is the idea that I want somebody to end up with their person. Yeah. Because that is the best marketing tool that you can have, is them screaming from the rooftops, I met my person. You don't get any better than that. That
seemed to be what eHarmony was doing at first. They were big on testimonial, and I actually talked to them about potentially doing a coaching in-house kind of program, and I think they did launch it, them or Match, but they had trouble connecting the dots for consumers to see why they wanted it or they wouldn't pay. They didn't think they needed it. So again, aligning of interests. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up.
Hello, my name is Ernesto. I've been thinking in this space for a long time. I wrote this book, Love Optimized, and this was 2016. But under the guise of a fictional corporation, kind of proposing smart tech solutions for the entire phase of a relationship, starting with neurodating. So you kind of just sit down at your first date with like brainwave connectors and you're optimized while you sit in your first date. So anyway, my question is beyond, dating and beyond that initial early romance. How do you see tech playing a role in, like, once you find the one, like, every relationship still takes work, and every relationship will still. I wrote this book when I was marrying my now wife, and you start to find new sides of yourself that come out when you marry someone or when you have kids together, and they're things that you might not have been predicted even by yourself knowing yourself. So, what is the role of technology moving into all the complexities of a long-time relationship?
As someone that also does couples work, I always share with the couples that I work with who come in and say, hey, there's so much out there that's also influencing our relationship. We've been together, we found each other, but we're having a difficult time. The first thing I say is boundaries, 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 right? Like really being able to set boundaries in terms of how much influence around technology that's taking place, that's permeating the relationship. The second part is setting those negotiables and non-negotiables in the relationship, like what's okay and what's not okay. For example, if there's a relationship or a couple that says we found each other but we want to have an open marriage, okay, what does that look like? I think the other part is really realizing that things will be evolving, they might get a little messy, but how deeply are you committed to each other to do the work if it gets messy, and are you keeping your communication open? Because of course there's a world out there, there's always going to be other people right around the corner that might be willing to sort of have a relationship with your partner. And so it's just really being able to be transparent with each other and talking about it, and then literally doing the work with either a professional or whatever you think you might need in your relationship.
And I think what's interesting about what you're asking is about tech moving from just the initial matchmaking into the actual relationship management and how that will happen. And I can't.
There's some great apps that are coming out right now that are specifically focusing on that. I think there's one I talked to a couple weeks ago called Kaplan, and they're growing astronomically, totally bootstrapped at the moment. And it just shows you that there is such an appetite for how do we support people from really a psychological perspective, but also growing as a couple, and that the relationship doesn't end once you've met. I think the difference with dating apps is once you're in a relationship, there's a stigma attached to still being on that dating app. So that's where that breakage happens. And there isn't a company to date that's figured out how do you make it socially acceptable once you're in that relationship to continue on in that app. And that's why they're moving over to other apps that are specifically about kind of relationship counseling or couples management post meeting. But there's that psychological break between that's a dating app. What am I doing on that still? Why do I still have it on my phone?
We'll need to get your book.
Oh yeah, thank you. This in the corporation in my book is like the third party in your relationship. Like you never have to worry about things because we're always there.
Kinky.
Creepy, but I like it.
Hey, I'm Andrew, frustrated user. Between the paradox of choice and the West Elm person and Tinder swindlers and things, how does someone, selfishly speaking, a man who's doing the work, as I've heard, stand out in this climate?
Rashied?
The statistics are against you.
Yeah.
And I think Kim probably knows the statistics better than I do, but you're going to see a lot more women than men. And so every app is going to have its own algorithm and its own way to game it, and you can try trial and error. But the other thing is I'll tell you is that where you are makes a very big difference. How long you've been there makes a very big difference. And so another important thing is just have a sense of perspective on, like, am I looking in the right places? Am I doing the right things? And then maybe Babita can speak to this, is that ultimately it's, and this is in our own data, the more you're not actually looking for a relationship, the more you're just confident in yourself and like, I don't need anyone. That tends to be when you end up finding someone. I mean, personally, that's been my experiences as well. Of like, I'm not looking for someone, and then I find them.
And are there certain ways where profiles float to the top of the algorithm?
I mean, you can always pay to boost your profile on lots of these apps. Honestly, a lot of it is that dating is work. It is work. It is hard. But oftentimes you get out of it what you put into it because you meet that person. But it does take effort and it sucks. And I think one of the things that I keep thinking about is how do you just make it a bit more fun? How do you take some of those pain points out of the dating experience? And when you think about creating your profile, that's one of the hardest things. You're like, what do I say about myself? What pictures do I add? What videos do I add? How do I stand out? And then the second one that's really challenging is what do you say to somebody when you match? And I think there's ways in which dating apps can solve for both of those. We're just not quite there yet. But it is work. At least there's a reward at the end.
I agree. It is work. It's become like the project plan in your personal space. And I do have to say, in my practice, clients do come in with saying, can you look at my profile? Can you help me with this? What do you know, give me your lens. Are there things, are there language that I am using that might be deterring people from wanting to reach out to me? Or am I attracting toxic behavior? Like, those are the things that are coming in and people are asking. And I would say, you know, don't lose the joy in it. Get clear on what you truly want and don't be afraid to ask for it. And really look at that and say, do I think that I'm picking individuals? Is there something that I'm doing that I'm repeating that may be continuing to happen and I'm not kind of getting what I need or want? And also, to answer your question, I think it is scary for people out there and for men wondering, is there something I'm going to write? Is it going to be like snapshotted and then put out, you know, into the world? But I think if there is an amount of vulnerability, but just continue to be true to yourself and say, this is what I want to need, and I'm just going to go for it.
Thank you.
I love that. All right, can we get the 2 more questions in? Quickly.
My question really quick. So I was listening to like a panel about sports entertainment with Barstool Sports, which is like a question came up was, what do you do about shy athletes that are really good at their sport, but they don't present well on camera, they don't photograph well, but they're the best in the top of the game? Answer was, well, they're not going to make a lot of money. So for this, instead, in like dating as well, right? You don't present well on camera, you don't maybe photograph well, maybe you don't even know how to write well, but ultimately you're really good for a relationship or dating. What do you do, and what are you trying to like support in those who may not be the best in their, you know, extroverted personality? So, simpler question: how do you help shy people that may not present well but need matches too?
I can answer really quickly. 1, get your friends to look at your profile and get their advice on it. And 2, split test. Try different pictures, try different paragraphs, see what gets you the most responses and the ones that you're looking for.
Really brief answer to that. Looking at our own data set, because we do have personality, like more introverts tend to use online dating versus extroverts. If you do have that extroverted side of you, and maybe I misheard you, just go meet people. I mean, as hard as this may be, you can put more of your emphasis in your social time in meeting people in person as well.
Love that. Last one.
Last
we
question.
made it.
Thank you first for the presentation. Really respect the work that you're all doing. But I just want to say that on a personal level, when you guys were describing the future of dating with technology and all, I was like, wow, that sounds like really awful. I made the personal decision to get off dating apps a few months ago, just because I realized what they were doing to the way that I was relating to people, in which I was looking at them and I was looking for a bio, I was looking for a picture, very superficial, without really appreciating the holistic approach to them. And my fear is that I've seen a lot of women that I'm interested in real life that are starting to do the same to me, in which they look at me and they don't see me as this holistic person, they see me as a bio, a picture, a status, whatever I put on my dating profile. My question is, I know I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one who said dating apps are not good for me. What happens with those people in a future in which all dating is moving online?
Difficult question. Who wants to take it?
I'll just start quickly with some more statistics. You're not alone. Looking at our own data, 35% of men quit online dating, like being unhappy with it. They may still have found someone, and 40% of women. So you're not alone in this. But what I would also sort of suggest is that, again, to what I said earlier, the more we can be aware that this is kind of a game that's being played, not just what the apps are doing with us, but what we're doing with other people, the better off we can be. And I hope there's some burden upon apps in the future to sort of remind folks to treat each other people not as profiles, but as humans. But again, as much as apps may inform, we as humans also have to realize that, to treat other people with respect.
I think that, yeah, Kim, you want to end it for us?
I think you're seeing the dating apps of today are all the same. And my hope is that there will be this next wave of dating apps that just looks at things differently. When you look at what's happening with Web3 in general, like you're going to see a massive shift in technology and adoption, and it's moving quickly. So I think the dating apps of today are not going to be what the dating apps 2-3 years from now are going to be.
Thank you all for joining us. That was a really fun session. Thank you to our panelists. We hope you have a fun rest of the South by Southwest. Thank you.